New record prices for fuel this weekend. The average price of petrol was 167p a litre on Sunday. That's according to figures from Experian Catalyst. Diesel, it now averages 179p a litre. The continuing surge in prices comes amid plummeting wholesale costs, leading perhaps inevitably to criticism of the big retailers. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, expected to cut fuel duty by at least 5p in his spring statement. It's this Wednesday. Let's turn to the Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the IEA. That's Andy Mair. Andy, thanks so much for your time. What are you expecting on Wednesday?
So the 5p cut in fuel duty will be extremely welcome if it happens. And what we need to understand here is this isn't really a tax cut. It's just the Chancellor agreeing that he doesn't get the bonus in tax that he would otherwise get from this huge rise in fuel prices that we've seen over the last 6 months. So every time price goes up by about £6 for you, £1 goes to the Chancellor just on VAT alone. And that's really what he's giving back by cutting fuel duty, albeit indirectly, through the funny way that this all works. So otherwise, on Wednesday, we're hoping that there's going to be a pause, or pause for reflection, at least, on the higher tax rises on NIC particularly, national insurance contributions. That would raise about 12 billion if it doesn't change. And we think that the government's going to consider raising the point at which that starts. So that could drop it a bit. But at the moment, the Chancellor is still quite committed to raising taxes now, we assume, so he can give some back later on when the public finances have been healed.
And it's always really useful when somebody reminds us just how much of the cost of what you put in your car, your van, whatever it is taken by the Treasury. I was talking to a farmer recently who reminded me what he pays for red diesel. It's not quite a fraction of what the rest of us pay, but it is a reminder of how much goes in fuel duty. Assuming we get this 5p cut, what does that say about our relationship now with the fuel duty escalator, this direct linkage for environmental reasons of an extra levy on what we put into our cars and vans, etc.?
Well, we have to hope it's dead, because it hasn't moved for about 11 years. And it hasn't moved because if you consider fuel duty to be an environmental tax, and just to be clear, it isn't, but it's as good as, then the price of fuel duty has massively been the highest carbon price in the economy. So the RAC estimate it's about £200 to £250 a tonne of CO2 emitted. And if you look at the market price of carbon at the moment, it's only about £40 to £80, so 3 to 4 times what it should be. Now, the government are changing the way they calculate what carbon price there should be at the moment. So they're trying to push it up to say that this is actually quite fair. But really, for a very long time, motorists have been stung from the environmental costs that are way beyond the actual impact of cars from petrol and diesel.
And in terms of who this, assuming we get the 5p cut per litre, Andy, I mean, that affects everybody equally, doesn't it? So would that qualify as a regressive tax cut?
It's quite complicated. So it's not quite true to say that petrol and diesel impact the poorest the most, because the very poorest in society don't have access to cars and vans. It's actually hard-working people who are involved in the trade and carrying things around. So your Amazon drivers, for example, or people who do long-distance driving, who suffer the most when these things go up. So in a way, this tax cut's quite useful in terms of helping those people who do the most to contribute to the infrastructure of the economy. So it's a very positive tax move in that way, but the distributional impacts are actually quite complicated. And you'll see different effects in different parts of the economy, depending more on jobs than on income levels.
Andy Mair, good to talk to you. I know you're going to be very busy, I'm sure, on Wednesday, if not today, and tomorrow as well. Thanks very much indeed. Ella Whelan is alongside me to ponder on this one. It's something people are feeling in their pockets on every forecourt up and down the land right now.
Yes, and you only have to cast your mind back a few months, really, to remember the scenes that we saw at petrol stations across the country in relation to the energy crisis that we were talking. You know, they say that a week is a long time in politics, but so much has happened in the last few months. You have to remind yourself that we did have a very serious energy crisis a number of months ago. And indeed, whatever about this 5p fuel tax cut, the bigger question, and the economist Phil Mullen makes this for Rishi Sunak, is what is he going to do? What are the long-term plans for making sure that there aren't instances like this in the future? Because the problem is that it's not that there are instances of individual crises or that there are shortages, but it's that people and indeed the Treasury and the economy is at such a low point that it can't handle any kind of pressure on it. And the point Phil Mullen makes is that rather than penny pinching here and giving a little bit back there, what Rishi Sunak could do and should do if he really wanted to be innovative around this is talk about the history of the British economy, the dearth and the dirges that it's been in for such a long time, and do something innovative to change that. The government has blamed the cost of living crisis and fuel rises and all the rest of it recently on the pandemic or on problems in Europe, and now on the war in Ukraine. And that's not good enough. We know that the reasons and the consequences for why this is happening are homegrown. They're not to be blamed on things happening on the global stage.
He's not going to lift the moratorium on fracking, sadly.
No, and they should, and that's a scandal because
and he's even blocking nuclear to some degree, we hear.
And that tells you that a government, I've made this point several times, that our government is trying to get away with normalising the fact that people will be short, that people will be in need. And that is really something in 2022. If a government cannot promise to not only allow people to heat their homes and fill their cars, but to live better lives year on year, to increase and improve the quality of life, then that is not a government that's fit to be in place.